Welcome back to the UR Immeasurable podcast, season 3. This season is going to be dedicated to those of us that are on our journey of healing and transformation. The focus of this season is going to be to identify and recognize healthy and unhealthy relationship dynamics. We're going to talk a lot about the spiritual tools that we'll need to become acquainted with to help us to stand, to operate in, and to flourish as our authentic self. Things like shadow work, energy healing, which will help us to shred or shed the guilt, the shame that we've been carrying, and also to do some much needed subconscious reprogramming. Now, as always, the episodes are going to air weekly, and the purpose of them is to support you as you embrace and become acquainted with your enlightened and untethered higher self. So I want you to grab your water, your juice, your wine, or your tea or your coffee, and let's toast to each other and our growth, our elevation, and abundance. Welcome back to the UR Immeasurable podcast. Today, I have with me a very dear friend. Her name is Eleanor Howe, and she is the owner of Intuitive Voyage, where she works as an intuitive decision-making expert. So, Eleanor, I thank you so much for joining me today. And I am so excited to introduce you to my audience and for them to hear all about the amazing work that you do.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. No, I'm glad to be here. I guess you could sum up what I do is like sort of giving anyone who listens to me the benefit of how, through a lot of trial and error, I've learned to always trust my intuition. And my goal is to have other people tune in to that because that is your inner voice, your protection, but also your connection to God and source. And it's always there for you. And I just found throughout my life, if I first listened to that voice and second had the courage to do what it told me to do, even if it seemed crazy, that my life would run a lot more smoothly. Now, I'm not going to say you listen to your intuition and everything is just like smooth sailing. There will be things that are hard and painful and sad, but even so, there's an easy way, an easier way to get through that. And then there is just the, oh Lord, take me now, everything has been crushed sort of way. And after putting myself through that, because I ignored what I was hearing, I thought, you know what? I can't take this anymore. I am not going to make it. Like literally not going to make it if I don't start tuning in because it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be like this. So I used it. I used to work in tech, and everyone thinks, oh, that's like the best. I worked in software and project management. And everything's, oh, that's the best. Everyone should do this. And it can be. But for me, it was kind of soul crushing. And I'm thankful for things I learned, like some of which I apply in my business now. But I knew I had to leave. And I didn't really listen to that inner voice. And I just got myself into toxic situations. And I would be like in a meeting or on a call, and that little voice inside of me is like, no, don't do that, don't say this. And you do it anyhow because your ego wants you to, and then you have to deal with the fallout. And I just knew I had to leave that situation, and I just jumped, and I was fortunate that it all worked out. But I realized if I had listened to that voice, if I had followed, and it isn't just airy stuff, I get practical do this type advice. If I'd listened to that, I feel like I would have skipped grades in the School of Hard Knocks because you don't have to repeat years. And what I find is that so many of us repeat years in the School of Hard Knocks when you don't have to. We come into life knowing certain things, and then there's certain things we just know as part of our soul journey, and they can help us, but we have to be willing to get out of the way and hear it. So that's what I do. I help people find their next best step, make good decisions, see who they are now and where they are clearly, and then then make choices based on that, intuitively led choices. Because what's right for you might not be right for me. What's easy for you might not be easy for me. When you see things online, especially, and you think, oh, that worked for that person, and it doesn't feel right to you. But look, they got these results. It's not your results, it's not your path. And then you try and do it, and sometimes you even set yourself back worse. So that's what I try to do. That's my main goal here.
That is amazing. And I know where you're coming from because I've lived that life and we've talked about that before. That, yeah, it's a whole lot easier to listen and to follow the steps, the path, even to the point of the gut feeling when it comes to making decisions or things that you're supposed to do, instead of being hard headed like most of us are and trying to figure it out the way that it naturally looks to you. And like you said, yeah, then you end up getting your head busted open in the school of hard knocks, and you're like, oh well, why? Well, because you didn't follow the signs. I mean, when it says no right turn, it means don't turn your tail right. So you mentioned dealing with the ego. That is a huge thing that a lot of us, not only throughout our lives, but even when we become entrepreneurs, that we have this, I don't know if I want to call it an image or whatever, that we feel like we have to project or we have to show up in this manner. We have to say these things. We have to do these things in order to be successful, not understanding that just because it worked for such and such doesn't mean it's going to work for you. That may not even be your path or your lane.
Yeah.
So is that something that, you have to help people with a lot?
Yeah, two things. One is we get these images. We see somebody who has the life we want, and we think, okay, I'm going to pattern myself after them. And that works to a certain extent, right? But there's also your family, and it's also part of our DNA, our ancestral line. One that immediately comes to mind is like struggle, right? If everyone around you is in struggle, even if you find a way to get out of struggle and start to thrive, you start to think, but that isn't really me. When no, it is you. Maybe you're meant to be the pattern breaker. Maybe you're meant to heal the bloodline, right? Or at least you're meant to show the people after you and around you that there is a different way to do something, right? And the other thing is, something coming up for me is that we obviously get older, right? We change, we grow, we evolve. But sometimes we have this image of ourselves in our head, like, I am this person I was when I was, say, 25. And in some ways, yeah, you are. You've got that spirit, you've got whatever it is inside of you. Maybe there are things you love to do. But sometimes you need to look around and say, okay, maybe I'm 40 now. And the decisions I made, the person I was at 25 could make these decisions. But at 40, I can't make these decisions. I need to make different decisions. I am a different person, right? The ego is so complicated because it's not just who you are now, it's who your people before you were. It's who you energetically latch onto and want to be. And then it's the former versions of ourself too. So you make these decisions for the 25-year-old version of you that maybe, like I said, the 40-year-old version of you needs a different choice. And you need to make decisions from where you are now. So quite often following your intuition involves kind of an unpleasant reality check. Like, that's beautiful, but that's not who you are now. And that's not going to serve you. And I know you could do these things. Like when I was younger, I could just 3 hours of sleep, get up, get the coffee, the double shot or whatever, eat a sugary pastry, because that would amp you up, and I'm good. And then I just get back on track the next night. Not so much now. So that's a basic thing, but sleep isn't basic when you don't have it, right? But it is I can't do that to myself. I can't do this. I need to choose differently. Like maybe if I'm tired, I just need to admit that I'm tired, or admit to my husband I'm too tired to drive. And whereas in the past I might have chanced it, I'm not going to try it now because I know I'm not there. I can't do this. So that is a big part of it. Intuition always isn't reality based. That's the thing, because it goes both ways. It's, is this my reality now? And quite often it'll point you towards your next reality. And you might think, well, it's a big gap between where I am now and where I'm going to go. But it's showing you that it's possible for you. I can't say that it's possible for you, right? So maybe what's realistic for some people, you know what? I'm just going to pull an all nighter. That's realistic for me. But that might not be realistic for someone else. So, yeah, I mean, intuition involves realness, realness at its core, because it gets to the truth of who you are. Like the title of your podcast is You Are Immeasurable. You are immeasurable when you are on your path, right? It's when you are on other people's paths. And quite often it's like, well, I was born into this circumstance. Their intuition shows us how we can get out of that because it doesn't have to be the same way it always was. Because your mama did it doesn't mean you have to do it. And there's some things that are great to do, like a tradition, right? But there's some things that you don't have to do because you're not her. You might love her. She's a part of you, but you're not her. And when you try to be her, you're going to burn yourself out.
Yes, I love that. I wanted to talk about something that you said that I absolutely loved. You said that you may be that one in your family that is the pattern breaker. I love that so much because I had a period at the beginning of this year where that's really where my intuition was leading me and what it was saying. And it made sense, but it was uncomfortable in that we are so attached to what's familiar, to what we know, to our family and our circle of friends. And when our intuition tells us to take that step and we don't know what is on the other side of that step, that I find is what makes it hard. And what I've had, unfortunately, had to experience numerous times in my life is that when I don't act on it, when I hear it, when I know it, when even if some of us are hard headed, so we get the
Mhm.
message a couple of few times,
Yeah.
and then it's like, so you're not listening, you're not paying attention. I know you heard me. So now I'm gonna put you in a situation where you don't have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, why do we do that to ourselves?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, yeah, that's true. If you don't listen, ideally you act when you hear the first whisper. If you don't, it gets louder and louder until things fall apart. I think it's just because we're meant to do this. The heat's just going to keep getting turned up until you do it. But that's the thing, though, especially this time of year, right? A lot of people, it's holiday season. A lot of people have to go to events, go to family events, do things that they maybe don't feel in alignment with. But how do I do this? I want to honor my family. I want to honor tradition, right? But you have to honor yourself at the same time. And I think in many ways, it's a lack of self worth when you don't think you're worthy of listening to this. You are worth things running more smoothly. And when we're caught up in the whole, you got to suffer, right? You got to suffer. I think that's what makes us not listen until the suffering. It's like, okay, we're giving you the easy option, but you only understand suffering. So we're going to have to package it the way you get it. And we're sorry it's going to hurt, but you could have just taken a pill and now you have to get surgery. It's that sort of thing. You have to believe you're worthy of a good feeling life before you really start listening. And sometimes we need to get there through pain. No other way.
Yeah, it is terrible. It's one of those patterns that I'm really paying attention to in my own life now. That even though when you reflect on it, then you like, what is wrong with me? This thing happened and I knew, so because I didn't listen, this was the outcome of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I got it. I get it. Great. Good. Well, then a few years later, something very, very similar happens. And you're like, oh, this is just like
Yeah.
that. And okay, I get it. But we have all of these isms and schisms that keep us there. We have all of these fears
Mhm.
and things. And you mentioned self-worth a moment ago, not believing in ourselves as far as an up level, or if it's applying to something that's a higher role, or as with this, becoming a full-time entrepreneur because you have a calling, that there are these things that you are supposed to be doing, but because you don't believe in you, or you feel like I can't do it how such and such did it, or I can't do it the way I think it's supposed to be done in my head.
Mhm.
So you procrastinate and you wait and you hold on to what is making you miserable. until your guides and everybody is like, all right, you know what? I'm about sick of this hard-headed heifer. So we
Yeah.
gonna do this.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you end up with this crazy, what I hear called most times a forced pivot. And now you like, what the hell am I supposed to do? And sometimes we almost end up in this panic because the safety net is gone, baby. It's you got to do what you got to do, but it could have been so much easier if you had listened. I think that is a lot, and I have a lot of conversations with people about their self-worth. Why don't you feel like you're worthy of this? Why don't you feel like you can do this? And of course, we know because this is what we do that it's limiting beliefs and different belief systems and things that stem all the way back to childhood. It also is when is the right time or the best time to just, I hate to say throw caution to the wind and roll with it,
Um, Yeah.
but it's so hard for many of us.
Yeah. It's hard for me too. I mean, in a weird way, when I worked in tech, a lot of it was process driven. And I would not say I'm the most logical person. I've always lived life very intuitively, even when I worked in that field. And it led to a lot of my success because I was using my intuition, like my soft skills. I had the technical skills, but also you have to know how and when to apply things. You have to have an intuition where things are broken. I think the biggest thing to do when you're forced to make a choice, right? The best thing to do is to find a way, and this helps to have a bit of self-knowledge beforehand. I call it your energetic five. So if you're a one is where you cannot get out of bed, you're just inert. And 10 is like you're almost manically happy. What's your five state in the middle? I call it like the flow state, but your energetic five. If you know where that is, try to get down to that. Even if you have to excuse yourself to go to the bathroom, right? Even if you don't have to go, just get yourself out of there and then when you feel calmer, you don't have to feel perfectly peaceful, but when you can actually know that you're hearing yourself, is what is my next best step? Or even just you can just flat out ask yourself, what do I do now? Or is it time to go? And sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no. And if it's no and you're unhappy, what do I have left to learn here? What do I need to do before I can go? And then it's hearing it. Sometimes it's a job you hate. You need another 3 months. You need to save every penny you can. And you need to start looking tomorrow. You don't need to have a gap, right? Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's no, you're not leaving because things are in the works that you can't see. And maybe in 6 months, the troublemakers are gone, right? Maybe there's a layoff and you get a package you would not have gotten if you're just like, the hell with it. And then you've got hopefully some severance, right? Or at least your vacation time paid out or whatever you're going to get, depending on the job you have. Or depending on what you do, if you work at like a business, maybe there's another business opening up on the other side of town next week or next month. And you won't know until you drive past on your way to do whatever and help wanted in the window. So it is hard. That's why you have to have belief in your self worth and the courage of your conviction, right? I talk about being the holiday season. So I came up with this method to get through it, but it relates to any situation where you have to go, you don't want to be there. It's first of all, do you have to be there? It's first step. Is your presence in your best interest? What do you have to participate in? Because sometimes we don't have to be there. And then there's also be a whole other podcast of saying no and not explaining yourself because you take a lot of energy and sometimes it re-triggers you. Sometimes I get invitations to things, texts or whatever, and you just feel you don't even need to look about who's going. You just feel, no, I don't need to be there. And you know what? You need to honor that before you go and something happens and you act out or you're just upset or whatever. It's honoring that and just saying, you know what, I can't. And there are very few people that you actually owe an explanation to, but no. And then no, well, if I don't want this, what do I want for Christmas or whatever you celebrate is what do you actually want out of this season? What would make you happy? Are there two or three things you want to do or show up at? Figure out what you want. And then if you are the person in the family who always cooks this dinner or people always come over to your house on Christmas Eve, and you're not really up to the big spread this year. You want to honor that, but yourself. I call it like the minimum viable holiday. It's this term from anything product based called minimum viable product. Just what's the minimum you need to do that would make your customers happy, right? And it's not like your family, your customers, but it's like the highlights of what you want to do. And you have to set boundaries what you will and won't do. So let's say you're okay with cleaning the house and having people come over, but you cannot cook. And it's like, you can come over and I'm going to provide these three things, but everyone else needs to bring a dish because I'm not up to that. This is what needs to happen. And there's some people who are going to be like, oh, but I always like when you make this. It's, you know what, maybe next year, or I'll send you the recipe. You can cook it and bring it and see who doesn't do it. But there's that. And then the number one thing is if you know you have to go, and this is where your intuition comes in too. If I go to this, what do I need to do? I call it entering the belly of the beast. You need your strategies. How do you think it's going to go? Right? Because our intuition, you could literally sit there, like on your couch, and see things play out in your mind. And if you are in your calm state, your intuition is going to show you. There's some people who always act out, right? Someone's always going to drink too much. Someone's always going to get into it with someone else, right? But then there are the unknowns. You need to honor those feelings, even write them down. If you want to test your intuition or build it, even, it's like, okay, it's 3 p.m. on Sunday. I have this feeling that next week's whatever, this is going to happen. And then you see what happened. Sometimes it won't even be the exact thing, but you might even feel the feeling if you're empathic that you're going to feel. And then you can plan for this a little. If they start fighting, I am going to go in the other room. You need to have an exit plan, or I am here for 30 minutes. Or as soon as they start talking about this, it's time for me to get my coat and go, right? Or to cope in the minute. If you're there, breathing exercises, how to give yourself space. It used to be when people smoked, there was the smoke break, right? A lot of people use that to cope. I'm just going to get out of here. You are protecting your energy because you're determining, how do I think this is going to go? And what will I tolerate? What will I tolerate and not tolerate? So when you're in it, like for me, my coping strategy would be I'm going to go out on the porch, or I'm going to go to the bathroom, or I am just going to say, I'm a little tired. I've already been there a couple hours, time to go. And then when you talked about, I heard my intuition telling me, and I didn't do it. There's something I call continuous intuitive integration. And this comes from basically a manufacturing process. It's plan, do, check, act. So you make your plan. Right here, you're tuning into your intuition. This is what I think is going to happen. You do the thing. And while you're there, this is a thing that a lot of people don't do. It is to check in with yourself in real time. This is where intuition and the realness and the currency comes into play. What do you need to do where you are right now? Not what you would like to happen, but what's happening now? What do you have to do to stay on track? We are sensitive creatures, right? When you start to feel the energy change, that is the time to go. Because maybe sometimes you literally save your life, or you protect yourself and your family from unpleasantness because you're like, oh, this is not getting good. Or, oh, the energy feels lighter. I'm going to stay, or I'm going to do this. But you do that. And then when you get home, like maybe the next day, whatever, you reviewed what happened. And you make mental notes. I'm going to do this next time. I'm going to make changes. But also, when you review it, it's like, before this happened, I felt this way. And then this happened. So the next time you feel that way, you come to associate the feeling with, I need to leave, or something's going to happen, or this is good, or this is where it starts to get good for me. It just demands so much self awareness. But again, tuning into yourself requires self worthiness and self trust. I know I just dumped a whole lot of stuff there, but you have to trust yourself, and you have to build your self trust, and you have to think you're worthy of it. Because when you don't think you're worthy, that's when the outside influences come in. And that's when you get torn apart into 50,000 different directions, and you can't plot your own course. It's actually a simple thing once you start really doing it, but it's hard because you're going to disappoint a lot of people. And but the one person you don't want to disappoint is yourself. So that's at the heart of it. I'm not saying you have to crush your kids' dreams if they want to go see Santa, and you can't. But maybe if you know you can't handle the crowd, maybe you find a cousin who can take them with their kids to go see Santa. You know what I mean? Because sometimes You think I'll just go, and then you end up up into someone you don't like, or your car gets a flat. And it's just tuning into yourself. That's how you get through these things. And sometimes you choose to take one for the team, right? But it's your choice. Some people think, what does tuning into my intuition mean? It's really a practical thing. It's really meant to get us through Earth School.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the questions that I did, and you did an amazing job of explaining it. Maybe it's just me, and you can tell me what you think, but I look at it as we don't realize that we have those self-worth issues. We don't realize that we don't trust ourselves. And that is why we end up in all of these situations where we don't want to be there, especially this time of year when it is just chaos and people and shit to do and stuff to buy and everybody's opinion and everybody's requirement and all of that is so outside of what it's supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're that person that is that pattern breaker that says, you know what, every single year for the past 35, 40 years, we've done this same thing
Mm-hmm.
and it ends up the same way.
Yeah.
Like you said, you usually know who's going to get into it.
Yeah.
You know whose child is going to break something
Yeah.
or do something they ain't got no business doing. When you're going to hit your limit
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be ready to pop off on everybody. You already know this. When you get to the point that you're like, okay, you know what? No, this is not good for me. This ain't good for
Yeah.
us as a family, us as a whole. But there's so much emphasis on the outside, so much emphasis on how do we look to others as a
Mm-hmm.
family. Everybody else does this, so we need to do this. And hey, guess what? No, the hell you don't. You absolutely don't. For myself, my youngest daughter is 23 now. I think the last Christmas that we had, she was, I want to say second grade. So she was
Wow.
what, 8 or 9, something
Yeah.
like that. Because even at that point, I was like, no, this is stupid.
Yeah.
This is absolutely stupid. And everything that everybody's doing and all of this stuff has absolutely nothing to do with what is supposed to be the reason for the season.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I cut all of that foolishness off. And because I talked to my children, they understood. They was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We weren't those parents that only got our kids things once a year or whatever. They got stuff all the time. They still do, and they all grown. The when you're the pattern breaker, everybody looks at you crazy.
Yeah.
You have to like look, this is what I know to be best for me. This is what I know to be best for my children because they don't need to see their mama smacking people around every
Yeah.
year because y'all got on my last damn nerves. That's an exaggeration, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And I'm gonna be the oddball. I'm gonna be the odd man out or whatever. And I'm okay with that. And I think that a lot of times that's why we keep on doing these things over and over again. That is basically just self-harm. You're torturing yourself
Yep.
unnecessarily because you don't want to be seen by the outside, the external,
Mm-hmm.
as being that different one. But that's part of your path. Everybody talks about authenticity and all of that. You being authentically you, you're not going to be like anyone else.
Right.
That's the whole point. If
Yeah.
we were all meant to be exactly the same, then guess what? Then we would be exactly the damn same.
Right. Right. I mean, it's sort of like with Christmas, people like burn themselves out. It's like if the season is supposed to be about peace, joy, and the birth of hope, right? And literally the birth of
Right. Get
someone
somewhere and
showing us,
sit down.
yeah, showing us a different way. then how can we embody that? With my family, there would be people, a lot of drinking, some people would actually come to blows and just craziness. And I'm like, this is not it. Whatever it's supposed to be, this is not it. If you want peace and joy, then that probably means not engaging in these activities or behaviors. If you want hope, what would make you hopeful? Well, maybe not having to deal with the aftermath or police being called, not having to deal with cleaning up a trashed house because people couldn't hold themselves together. When you asked about what makes you feel that you're worthy, for so many of us, you can tell you have self-worth issues based on how much crap you tolerate in your life. How much nonsense do you tolerate? Two people could be in the same situation. Maybe they don't have a lot of money. Maybe there are just all sorts of issues around them, but those two people will have different lives within that same container. But of course, it's assuming you have the ability to choose. But in most cases today, I would say that we have the ability to choose differently. How much crap do you tolerate? And how beat down do you feel in general? That is a way of saying that you don't have a lot of self-worth. I know people hate this and I hate it too. And in most cases, you can teach people how to treat you. Because if it's like, oh, you can do it to me, it's even in the way you hold yourself. Quite often, people get picked on because they're going through things or whatever and they look vulnerable. Whereas you're like, you know what? Things might be rough around me, but there's some crap I have to tolerate, and there's a whole lot I don't. And you do not get past that line. You show up differently, people treat you differently. So when you say no, and you are in that, this is what I tolerate energy, then people are like, okay, well, I'm sorry, I'll see you next time, as opposed to, why aren't you doing it? And then you get being berated or guilt tripped or whatever. It's not ideal, but eventually you grow out of it. But for many of us, the gateway to seeing self-worth is just like, how much crap is there in your life? Then what would your life be like if you didn't go rescuing grown adults who don't need rescuing? What would life be like if you cut off people talking to you that way the first time it happened? What would your life be like if you felt you didn't need to overgive people for them to like you? I just think that most of us know that there's something better. And it would be great if you're like, yes, there is better. I'm going to choose that. But until you're ready to just choose it, you're going to suffer. Not what
Yeah.
people want to hear, but you're going to
Mhm.
suffer until you start showing up differently for yourself.
You're speaking my language now. Absolutely. Absolutely. Even when you said you have to teach people how to treat you, that is absolutely the truth. And it's funny, I had a conversation earlier where I was explaining that I used to have this mindset, but I recognize now that it very much is or was a self-worth issue. I had this thing like I didn't care what people said about me, what they thought about me, what they did to me. It meant nothing. You know what I mean? I didn't pay attention to it. However, somebody I loved, that was not gonna fly.
Yeah,
If it one of my babies, my husband, mom and them, no, you don't get to do that.
yeah,
You're gonna get a whole nother animal.
yeah,
And really got to thinking about it. Wait a minute though. So are you saying that you care more or you love them more than
right.
you love yourself?
Yep.
Well, what type of ass backwards foolishness is that? But we don't look at it that way, especially, and I bring this up a lot, that it depends on when you came up, what generation you're a part of. And it's very much a thing. I'm 48, so I'm Gen X. And a
Thank you.
lot of what we were taught was about the image, what people saw when
Yeah.
you walked out of the house or whatever. Yeah, inside the house, everybody might be beating the hell out of each other, fussing each other out, all of those things. But when you stepped out of that house, you had to be a united front, or that's the image that you had to uphold. You wasn't out in the streets acting a fool, embarrassing your parents. That's part of when whatever happens in this house stays in this house.
Yep.
You know, all of these types of things because we were conditioned that way. We were taught that. So that too gave us that belief, that subconscious belief that I don't matter.
Yeah.
And so it presents itself for a lot of us in that way. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, for me, of course, it was probably extreme just because that's who the hell I am.
Right.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want to me. That's fine. I'll have fun with that. But you're not going to do this to those that I love. And I had to really start, okay, ma'am, do you love you? Because if you don't love you, then how are you even gonna know what it is or recognize it when it's being received from somebody else? And I think that also has a lot to do with how we are able to connect with our intuition, accept and acknowledge our intuition. Because if you have that low self-worth and all of those things going on with you, then it's going to be, well, why would my ancestors, the spirit guides, why would God care?
Right.
Why would anybody care
Right.
about me?
Right.
And
Right.
so it's another one of those things that we have to get over and recognize that no, sugar, you something special.
Yeah, you have inherent worth. You are loved just because you exist, which is a hard one for me. You are loved, are lovable, and you deserve respect
Hmm.
because you exist. Trust has to be earned, but respect, we just are born innately worthy of respect and love. Some of us have a harder time getting it, but we're all worthy of it. And especially like intuition, it comes from the source of pure love, right? And if you don't believe
Right,
you are lovable and loved, then you don't want to hear it because it's like, well, why would I want to make this easier on myself? Because
right,
if you have self love, and so many people think self love is bad, it's like, no, if you love yourself, I don't think you are as selfish, right? Um,
exactly.
if you love yourself, you don't put yourself in these situations. If you love yourself, you want things to go well for you. And as soon as things become very difficult, that's you step back and say, does it have to be like this? Instead of like, well, I did this, so I deserve that. And I mean, karma is a whole other discussion, but just I inherently deserve a good life. It may not be like the billionaire life, but you deserve a good, safe, healthy, happy life.
Yeah,
You have to feel
yeah,
like you deserve that, and you have to know you're worthy of it. Then our intuition wants us to have the best life possible,
yeah,
the best life for us, because having your own yacht is not everyone's path.
absolutely not. Another thing that I think about a lot when it comes to the self-worth issues, the negative self-talk, all of those things is loving your neighbor as yourself, right?
Yeah,
Well, here's the deal. If you don't love yourself, you can't.
exactly.
You can't. And to me, that is part of the problem that we have with society now. And not only that, but going back to that image that you put forward. We
Right.
are, I hate to say it, so fake in our image and that which we project
Mhm.
that everybody looks put together. Everybody looks like they're making it. Everybody looks like they're doing big things,
There.
but that's not the truth. When you don't have issues with your self-worth, you don't have to mistreat other people. When
Yeah.
you truly love yourself, everything you do is from a place of love. And
Yeah.
it's about sharing that. It's about giving a little bit of what you got to somebody else. It's one of those things that you want to share. But misery and all of that wants to spread.
Yeah.
It wants to spread as well. And I feel that part of the reason that people don't treat each other like people,
Right.
like they're worthy of love and worthy of respect and worthy of just basic human decency, It's because we don't love ourselves.
Yeah. We don't see that we are lovable. We don't get messages. Well, some of us do, but many of us don't get messages that we are loved, we are lovable. We think love has to come from another person
Yeah,
or an external source. And when the source of that love goes away, or they never show up for you, or they don't show up in the way you think it should based on what you've seen, I should be in a relationship. I should have this. You tend to think, well, there's no love in my life, but there is. There's your self love, there's a love of friends, there's a love of community. Love doesn't mean being a sap and a pushover. It,
absolutely.
yeah, it means that you have value, you have immeasurable value, and
Absolutely.
you deserve these good things. Now, how we get them will vary from person to person, but also the concept of what your good life looks like and just
Mm,
holding that close. But yeah, it's very true because if you think you should have this and you don't, and your neighbor next to you has it, then you're jealous and maybe you're just going to be a terrible neighbor to them. And whereas if it's they have this thing, but what do I really want? Do I want family? Some people, they have families and they treat them terribly because they don't
yeah.
really want it. And
Hmm.
maybe if they'd been honest with themselves, maybe they wouldn't have had a family, right?
Hmm.
They wouldn't have done these things. Or do I really want this lifestyle? Or would I be happy with something else? It's interesting, but yeah, the intuition leads you to self-worth and self-love and knowing what you want and knowing who you really are and acting accordingly. Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's much more than I'm just hearing a parlor trick. It's much more than that. It's
Yeah.
much more than I know that in 3 seconds that a blue car is gonna come speeding around the corner
Great.
and whatever. It's much more than that. It's literally your compass. It's your navigation system. It's your warning, your alarm, your hey. And it's also there to let you know that, hey, boo, you got something going on inside of you
Yeah.
that you need to work on. It's always internal first. In society, so many things is about the outside, the external, what everybody else sees. Yeah, it's great and groovy if you get messages and all of those things for others. But what are you doing with the ones that you get for you? And if you're
Exactly.
somebody that really wants to change you, wants to change your life, wants to change how you're doing things, your cycles, your patterns, then yeah, that's what your intuition is there for.
Yeah.
It will do that for you. You got to pay attention to
Yep.
it and stop projecting everything on everybody else. I think
Yes.
that's the part of the intuition that I think a lot of people overlook.
Yeah, if you find fault with others or there are things you are envious of in others, I mean, envy isn't the greatest thing, but it can show you what is missing inside of you
Mhm.
and how can you get it for you in
Mhm.
an above board way.
Yeah.
I just think the world would be a better place if we listened to our intuition collectively. I mean, that's why I talk about more intuition than like mediumship or psychic work, because I do that.
Mhm.
That's part of who I am. But I realized that before I could show up for anyone else, I had to show up for me.
Absolutely.
And I had to put boundaries about what I would and wouldn't do. Like, I don't
Yeah.
do professional mediumship for any number of reasons. But do I get messages? You bet I do. You know,
Absolutely.
and do I figure out the best way to pass them along as best I can? It's just, I think that the world would be a better place and it wouldn't be like Atlantis or utopia or even heaven necessarily, because it's still Earth. But if we lived intuitively, I think lots of problems would go away. We'd have
Mhm.
different problems because we're human. But
Right.
I think that sort of emptiness and disconnection that many, many people feel more and more, um, I think we would lose a lot of that. There are always people
Mhm.
who would be out on the fringes, but I think people would feel more connected. Doesn't mean we're all the same, that we all think the same, we all do the same,
Mhm.
but we would see the divinity in each other and we would honor
Right.
it. And we would honor that. You know, I am different from you, you are different from me, but I see that inner light in you.
Hmm.
And I'm going to respect that, even though so many other things are different. And I think, I don't know, did we ever really have that? Maybe we had it in some communities or in some subsections, but if we could get that, I think that maybe we don't need to continually look to the past. Maybe we just need to move forward and say,
Yeah.
this is what we need. We need this sort of like soul to soul connection. And we
Yeah.
aren't all going to become like one blob of people who all are the same, right? That's not possible.
Right.
But
Right.
when we love and respect and trust ourselves, we can project that onto other people. That's the good projection.
Yeah.
We can we can live our life accordingly, and we can see that the rising tide lifts all boats. You don't leave people behind. It's not a zero sum game. There is enough for all of us, right? And I know this sounds something like from a Charlie Brown Christmas because we're both Gen X,
Mm-mm. I
right?
agree.
But
I agree.
it's possible. And intuition will help us see the way.
Yeah. It'll help you to see that spark in somebody else. It'll help you to see that sore spot that someone else may be struggling with and give you that kind word or that gesture or whatever that will help bring them up. And also let you know that, hey, it doesn't take away from you to show love to somebody else because there's plenty to go around.
Oh, yeah. One thing I do when I take a taxi or an Uber or someone drops something off, or I was like out raking leaves and the letter carrier came up to the house. And I feel like there is something I need to say to them. I'll just ask my guides, is there a message this person needs to hear? And please speak it through me with the right words. And sometimes you do it and the person just lights up. I love the idea of putting out little gifts for people who deliver stuff to you, but sometimes you also just need to hear the right thing at the right time. And if you are so gifted and you can do that, then that's the real Christmas gift, the real holiday gift.
Yes, I love all of this.
Oh,
So
good.
tell us, even though I'm going to have all your links and everything in the show notes, but tell us, do you have any events coming up? You have anything in particular that you are promoting right now that you'd like to share with us? We'd love to hear all about all of that.
Okay, well, I guess I'm building community right now. So you can follow me on social media like Instagram. I'm on Facebook and I have a link tree with links, but I'm doing this sort of community that will just evolve into like the Intuitive Voyage community, but intuitively surviving the holidays. So I'm posting content around, I'm in the trenches with you, what I'm doing, how I am working this process I came up with, how you can apply it. Do you have any questions or issues where you need help? Where are you stuck? Do you have something you're stuck going to? And then if you want to carry on a deeper conversation, I started a Telegram group where you can join. It's not about dumping, but it is about I'm going into this. So you'll be with other people who are in the same thing. But I might do pop-up readings. Then in January, and probably not the beginning of the month because we need some time to recover, I'm going to do intuitive goal setting for the year ahead. Some of us have the same New Year's resolutions and you never do them. And it's because they're not aligned or now is not the time. And you need to know that. So I want to do some work around that. And if there are any big decisions people are making in the year ahead, how can you plan ahead for that? So, yeah, if you were just like, oh God, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this family dinner, come on and chat or comment on one of my posts and I'll give you a little bit of insight. Just so it doesn't have to hurt.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I know there are lots and lots and lots of people that are experiencing all of that right now. So, yes, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today. Thank you for sharing your insight, your intuition, and your all around loveliness.
Thank you. I so appreciate this.
No, no problem. And yes, we're definitely going to do the saying no and not explaining yourself. I love that. I love
Yeah.
because I'm an over explainer. I know why and I'm working on it, but I still it's a habit, so I fall into it. Thank you guys for listening and joining us. And until next time, cheers to your transformation. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the UR Immeasurable podcast. Please remember to subscribe so that you can be notified whenever new episodes are dropped. Also, I'd love to have your feedback and your comments as well as your 5-star rating. Additionally, if you'd like to connect with me, the show notes list all of my social media handles so that you can do so. So until next time, thank you so much and cheers to your transformation.